Good evening. And welcome to a quiet, peaceful journey into one of New Jersey's most chilling yet mysterious tales. Tonight, we will slowly explore the story of the Devil's Tree, a lonely, gnarled oak said to be haunted by dark legends and whispers from the past. As you lie down, let your eyes soften. Let your body sink into your pillow. And let the gentle rhythm of my voice guide you. We will wander through quiet forests, examine strange stories passed down through generations, and uncover the history behind the shadowed branches of this infamous tree. So, take a deep breath. Relax. And drift gently into the mysterious yet calming story of the Devil's Tree. The forests of New Jersey are old. Very old. They stretch across the land like a soft, green blanket, covering hills and valleys, twisting around streams and winding roads. When you stand at the edge of these forests, it's easy to feel the stillness that has existed for centuries. The air is heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Tiny streams whisper over rocks, and the wind brushes softly through the leaves, making a gentle, rustling sound, almost like the quiet breath of the trees themselves. Among these woods, in a small and otherwise unremarkable part of South Jersey, there is one tree that people notice more than any other. They call it the Devil's Tree. And though it stands in a forest like many others, it seems different. It is taller, perhaps, or wider. Its trunk is dark and gnarled, twisted in ways that feel unnatural, almost as if it has grown in secret, apart from the other trees. Its branches stretch outward like the arms of a figure frozen in a moment of warning. And even in the calm of the afternoon, there is a sense of quiet that seems to settle more heavily around it than anywhere else. The story of the Devil's Tree is old. Some say it dates back hundreds of years, to a time when the land was wild and the forests untouched by roads and houses. Others whisper that it has always been there, that it existed long before any map or settlement recorded its presence. People who live nearby have told stories of strange events. Travelers who have passed by late at night sometimes report feeling an unexplainable chill in the air, or a sudden urge to leave the area. And over time, these stories grew, as stories often do, until the tree became not just a tree, but a legend. Legends have a way of growing quietly. They do not demand attention, but they settle in your mind like a soft shadow. The Devil's Tree, perhaps more than any other, has invited stories to surround it. People say that the tree has been the site of rituals long ago, that strange figures have appeared near it in the dead of night, and that animals avoid it without explanation. They say that if you stand beneath its branches at midnight, you may hear whispers in the wind. And yet, for every story that chills the imagination, there is another that simply marvels at the tree itself, a towering, ancient presence that has endured storms, fire, and time, surviving long after the world around it has changed. To truly understand the Devil's Tree, it helps to picture the forest as it once was. In the early days of New Jersey, the land was filled with thick forests, wild animals, and the quiet of nature untouched by humans. Travelers would move slowly, following dirt paths that wound through the woods, careful not to disturb the creatures around them. The trees grew tall and close, their branches creating shadows that danced in the sunlight. Birds nested high above, and deer wandered silently through the underbrush. It was in these forests, away from towns and villages, that people first began to notice certain places that felt different, places where the air seemed heavier, the silence deeper, and the trees older. The Devil's Tree was one of these places. Early settlers, the stories say, noticed it almost immediately. It stood apart from the others, a singular tree with dark bark and twisted limbs. Some claim that even in summer, when all the other trees were green and full, the devil's tree seemed to carry a shadow within it, a darkness that moved with the wind. Others believed it was simply an unusually old oak, grown large and strange through the centuries. But as people began to tell stories, the tree took on a reputation that no ordinary oak could hold. Farmers and travelers spoke quietly about it, exchanging stories in hushed tones over fences and at market tables. They said that those who dared to harm the tree were cursed. Others claimed that they had seen strange marks on the bark, like symbols carved long ago, though no one could say by whom. And still, the tree remained. No matter the seasons, no matter the storms, it stood. Its roots dug deep into the earth, anchoring it against time itself, and its branches reached outward, reaching toward the sky as though holding on to secrets. What is remarkable about the devil's tree is that its legend is both eerie and quiet. Unlike tales that scream of terror or demand attention, the stories here are soft, like whispers in the dark. They do not rush you, but invite you to linger, to imagine, to notice the subtle strangeness of a place that seems familiar yet slightly off. The forest itself is ordinary enough. Birds sing in the morning, deer roam at dusk, the wind moves gently through the leaves, but the tree reminds visitors that there is more than what meets the eye. There is history. There is mystery. And sometimes, there is a feeling that something unseen watches from the shadows. The locals, in their calm and steady way, respect the tree. They do not linger beneath it after sunset. They avoid touching it. And yet, they talk about it, always with a sense of curiosity mixed with caution. It is this combination, the quiet, enduring presence of the tree, and the whispered stories of strange happenings, that has made it one of New Jersey's most famous, yet most understated, mysteries. Even today, travelers on the roads near the forest sometimes catch a glimpse of it from a distance. Perhaps it is just a dark shape among the trees. Perhaps it is something more. Either way, it inspires a certain kind of awe, a soft, lingering awe that encourages you to pause, to breathe, and to wonder. And that is where our story begins, with a tree that is ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. A silent witness to centuries of history, and a reminder that the forests around us hold quiet stories, waiting to be discovered. As we continue through this tale, we will meet the people who told these stories, the travelers who reported strange occurrences, and the curious explorers who could not resist visiting the tree themselves. We will hear whispers of shadows, glimpses of shapes, and quiet moments that make the hair on the back of your neck stand just slightly taller. But throughout it all, we will move gently, slowly, letting the forest and its mysterious trees speak to us in their own quiet, ancient way. So, close your eyes softly, take a slow breath, and imagine walking down a winding forest path. The sun filters through the leaves, scattering soft light across the earth. You see the trees around you, tall and calm. And then, in a clearing just ahead, you notice a tree unlike any other, a dark, twisted oak, standing alone. Its presence is strong, silent, and oddly comforting. This is the devil's tree, waiting to share its quiet story, and we will follow that story together, one gentle step at a time. Long before the devil's tree became a name whispered among travelers and locals alike, the land around it was alive with stories and superstition. In the quiet forests of South Jersey, every tree, every hollow, and every stream seemed to hold a secret. People moved slowly through the woods, careful to notice the subtle sounds of rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and the soft chirping of birds hidden high in the branches. There were moments when the wind seemed to sigh through the forest, carrying with it the faintest hints of voices, though perhaps they were only imagined, or perhaps they were the first whispers of legend taking shape. The earliest accounts of the Devil's Tree date back over a century, though no one can say exactly when the first story was told. Some local historians suggest that it began with farmers and settlers who worked the land near the forest. These were simple people, attuned to the rhythms of nature. They would rise with the sun, tend their fields, and return home to sit by the fire as the evening sky darkened. And like many people who live close to the land, they noticed things others might overlook. One tree, they said, seemed different. It was alone in a clearing, its dark, gnarled trunk standing stark against the softer, more uniform shapes of the other oaks around it. Stories began with small observations. Some farmers claimed that their animals refused to go near the tree. Horses would shy away, and dogs would growl or tremble when led close. Chickens seemed nervous in its shadow, and even the birds that nested nearby seemed to avoid its branches. It was as if the tree itself exuded a presence, quiet but undeniable, that unsettled all living things. From these quiet beginnings, the whispers grew. People began to tell tales of strange figures glimpsed near the tree at night. One farmer, returning from the market just as the sun had set, said he saw a shadow moving near the tree. At first, he thought it was another person, perhaps a traveler resting or someone checking the land. But as he approached, the shape seemed to vanish, leaving only the tree in the fading light. Another account tells of a man who passed by late in autumn and noticed a strange, lingering chill in the air, even though the rest of the forest was warm with the last rays of sunlight. He said the feeling was not frightening, exactly, but deeply unsettling, like standing too close to something ancient and unknowable. Perhaps the most enduring of the early stories involves a young boy who wandered too close to the tree one evening. According to the tale, he was curious, drawn by the tree's unusual shape. Its branches seemed to twist in a way that called to him, almost beckoning him forward. He approached cautiously, and as he stood beneath its shadow, he felt a sudden pressure in the air, as if the forest itself had taken a breath. The boy ran home, shaken but unharmed, and told his family what had happened. His parents, wise and practical, warned him to stay away from the tree, and from that night on, the story passed quietly from one neighbor to another. Over time, these small, whispered stories began to intertwine. One tale would grow slightly with each retelling, not out of malice, but simply because human minds tend to fill in the gaps. A shadow became a figure. A chill became a cold hand brushing against your shoulder. An ordinary tree became a marker of something extraordinary, a focus for the unexplainable. By the early 20th century, the Devil's Tree had become well known among locals, not as a place of terror, but as a place of curiosity and quiet unease. It is important to note that these early stories were never loud or dramatic. There were no great shouts of fear or panic. Instead, the legends of the Devil's Tree spread gently, almost like a fog rolling through the forest at dawn. People spoke softly about the tree as they might speak about a strange cloud in the sky or a deer seen far away in the distance. There was respect in their voices, a recognition that this was a tree different from all others, and that perhaps it had a story of its own, older than any of them. As the years went on, visitors from outside the immediate area began to take interest. These were people drawn by curiosity, by a desire to see for themselves what the Devil's Tree looked like. Some were historians, interested in tracing the roots of local legend. Others were writers, looking for inspiration in the quiet, shadowed woods. And some were simply wanderers, moving through the forest with no plan but to experience its stillness. All of them noted the same thing: the tree stood alone, its presence undeniable, and the air around it seemed heavier, denser, as though the forest itself acknowledged its significance. One visitor, a teacher from a nearby town, described the tree in a journal entry. She wrote about the rough texture of the bark, the way its branches twisted into unexpected angles, and the strange calm that seemed to settle over the clearing. She noted that it felt as if the tree had watched countless years pass, and that it might continue to watch quietly for centuries to come. Others recorded similar impressions: an oak that was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time, rooted deeply in the earth yet reaching toward the sky with almost human intention. Even in the early 1900s, the legends continued to grow. There were stories of strange markings on the bark. Some said they were initials carved long ago, others claimed they were symbols with unknown meaning. People speculated that perhaps the tree had been used for rituals by early settlers or even Native Americans long before European arrival. These ideas remain speculation. Yet they added layers to the legend, deepening the sense of mystery without ever fully explaining it. Perhaps the most intriguing part of the early legends is how they balanced fear with fascination. Visitors might feel a chill or a sense of unease, but there was also a pull, a gentle invitation to stand in the shadow of the tree and imagine the centuries it had witnessed. The Devil's Tree became a place where the ordinary world and the extraordinary quietly met. A person could walk among the forest paths, surrounded by familiar trees, and then pause in a clearing and feel the subtle strangeness of this single, remarkable oak. It was a gentle reminder that even in the most familiar landscapes, there are pockets of mystery waiting to be discovered. By the time the mid-20th century arrived, the Devil's Tree had firmly established itself in local culture. Families passing through the forest would point it out to their children, not as a place of terror, but as a place of story, of legend. Teenagers dared each other to approach it on summer nights, feeling the thrill of mild fear mixed with excitement. Journalists occasionally mentioned it in local newspapers, recounting the whispered tales and reporting the subtle chills some visitors felt. And the tree itself remained unchanged, indifferent to attention, storms, or the passage of time, its presence quietly commanding, like a sentinel guarding secrets no one could ever fully know. Even today, the early legends matter. They remind us that stories are not born in sudden fear or loud events, but often in small, quiet observations: the flutter of a bird's wings, the shiver in the air, the unusual twist of a branch. The Devil's Tree teaches us to notice these moments, to let our curiosity drift slowly like a soft breeze through the forest, and to recognize that mystery can exist gently, without urgency, without alarm. So, as we move further into this story, imagine the forest of New Jersey as it was 100 years ago. Imagine families walking cautiously among the trees, travelers pausing to observe a strange shadow, and whispers floating quietly in the wind. And imagine standing at the edge of the clearing, looking at the dark, twisted oak, feeling the calm, steady weight of its presence. The Devil's Tree had become more than just a tree, it had become a legend, quietly growing with each story, each whisper, each careful observation. And now, we will continue our journey into the history and mystery of the Devil's Tree, exploring the strange events and curious tales that would continue to surround it for generations. Each story, each observation, brings us closer to understanding why this tree, so ordinary and yet so extraordinary, has captured the imagination of so many, while remaining quietly, patiently, itself. As the years passed, the Devil's Tree quietly remained in the forest, unchanged yet quietly compelling, its branches twisted like the arms of a sentinel keeping watch over the land. The small whispers and cautious stories of local farmers gradually gave way to more structured accounts, as townsfolk, travelers, and curious explorers began documenting their encounters. These stories are not loud or terrifying in the way ghost tales often are. Instead, they carry a soft, lingering unease, like the forest itself breathing slowly around the tree, inviting contemplation more than alarm. One of the most famous accounts comes from the 1930s, when a traveling salesman named Harold Dyer passed through the area. He was a practical man, accustomed to long drives through the countryside, carrying his briefcase filled with samples and a notebook full of contacts. One late autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a muted shade of amber, he found himself driving along the quiet back roads near Mount Laurel. He noticed the clearing ahead almost immediately. There, in stark contrast to the softer, more uniform shapes of the surrounding oaks, stood the Devil's Tree. According to Dyer, the moment he saw the tree, he felt an odd pull, an urge to stop, to step out of the car and simply observe. The forest around it was silent, as if holding its breath, and a cool breeze swept across the clearing, brushing against his face in a way that was gentle yet persistent. He described the bark as darker than he had imagined, almost black in the fading light, and the branches as twisted in strange, unnatural angles. While he was careful to note that nothing overtly frightening occurred, he said that a sense of unease lingered in the air, subtle but unmistakable. It was the kind of feeling that makes one pause, tilt one's head slightly, and quietly wonder what stories the tree could tell if it could speak. In the 1940s, a local teenager named Samuel Reed recounted an experience that would later become one of the most referenced stories of the tree. Samuel was wandering through the forest one summer evening, eager to explore and enjoying the freedom of long, quiet days. He found himself standing before the Devil's Tree as twilight fell. According to his story, the branches above seemed to shift in the dimming light, forming almost human-like shapes. Shadows stretched across the clearing in slow, deliberate movements, though he could see nothing else there. Samuel described a sense of being watched, though he never glimpsed a figure or a person. It was more the sensation of the tree itself observing him, silently and without judgment. Over the decades, countless accounts like these would appear. A young couple driving home from an evening picnic in the 1950s recalled a sudden drop in temperature as they passed the clearing. Their car headlights illuminated the twisted branches, and for a moment, they both felt as though the tree had turned toward them, though no motion could be discerned. They described a weight in the air, a sensation that pressed gently against their senses, leaving them with the vague but persistent impression that the tree was more than mere wood and leaves. Some stories were stranger still. In the 1960s, a man walking his dog reported that the animal suddenly froze in the middle of the path, growling softly at the clearing where the tree stood. The man himself felt a prickling at the back of his neck, a small shiver that spread slowly down his spine. He glanced at the tree, half expecting to see something, or someone, but found nothing. The air remained heavy and silent, the branches swaying faintly in the wind, and the forest seemed to exhale around him. The dog would not approach the clearing again, and the man never returned after sunset. What is remarkable about these eyewitness accounts is not their horror or dramatic intensity, but their quiet, persistent strangeness. None of the stories suggest a sudden attack, a loud scream, or a horrifying apparition. Instead, the Devil's Tree seems to exert a subtle, understated influence over its surroundings. Shadows linger a moment too long. The temperature drops slightly. Animals behave oddly. Travelers and locals feel a gentle pressure in the air, an almost imperceptible weight. Like a reminder that the forest holds secrets older than the people walking through it, one notable recurring detail involves marks on the tree's bark. Some visitors claim to see strange symbols carved into the trunk, though historians and locals have debated their origins for decades. Were these initials left by settlers long ago? Ritual markings from early inhabitants? Or simply natural grooves formed over centuries? No one knows for sure. The ambiguity only added to the sense of quiet mystery. A simple observation, a notch, a line, a shadow, could become the spark of imagination, a reminder that there are things in the world that resist explanation. The 1970s brought a surge of curiosity. Journalists, photographers, and amateur historians began to take more interest, documenting the tree in articles, photographs, and personal accounts. Many noted the same subtle phenomena reported decades earlier: sudden chills, the eerie stillness of the surrounding forest, and the twisting, unnatural appearance of the branches. Some photographs appeared strange, with faint shadows that seemed to move against the light, though no one could confirm what they were. And yet, the stories remained calm, understated, and deeply compelling, a gentle invitation to observe and wonder, rather than to fear. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of these eyewitness tales is their consistency. Across decades, different people have reported similar experiences: a sense of being watched, shadows that linger, animals avoiding the clearing, and the quiet, almost tactile presence of the tree itself. These accounts do not tell of dramatic, sensational events. They tell of subtle, persistent phenomena, the kind of experiences that sink into memory and curiosity over time. They are reminders that the world holds quiet mysteries, and that the ordinary can become extraordinary with careful attention. Even for those who did not believe in the supernatural, the Devil's Tree carried weight. Its history, its age, and the pattern of stories surrounding it created a presence that was hard to ignore. For historians and folklorists, it became a case study in local legend, a way to explore how ordinary landscapes can inspire extraordinary tales. And for casual visitors, it became a place to pause, to notice the gentle strangeness of the world, and to consider the possibility that some mysteries are meant not to frighten, but to quietly captivate. By the end of the 20th century, the Devil's Tree had firmly established itself as both a physical landmark and a legend. It drew curiosity, admiration, and a small measure of respectful caution. Visitors came not to prove anything, nor to confront terror, but to witness something enduring, to step quietly into the shadow of a tree that had watched the centuries pass. They stood beneath its branches, feeling the subtle weight of history and the unspoken stories carried by the wind. And they left with memories of a gentle, persistent mystery, a tree that was alive not in the conventional sense, but in the stories it inspired and the quiet wonder it awakened. The eyewitness accounts of the 20th century remind us that the Devil's Tree is more than folklore. It is a part of the forest's history, a natural monument that carries human imagination, curiosity, and awe. It teaches us that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are not those that shout or demand attention, but those that exist quietly, steadily, inviting observation and contemplation. And as we continue this story, we will explore how the tree inspired legends of curses, dark rituals, and strange happenings, tales that blended history, imagination, and human fascination into a single, enduring myth. So, as you rest and listen, picture the forest clearing at twilight. Imagine the soft wind brushing through the leaves, the stillness of the trees, and the dark, gnarled trunk of the Devil's Tree, standing alone yet unwavering. Imagine the generations of travelers, farmers, and curious souls who paused here before you, feeling the same gentle weight in the air, noticing the same quiet strangeness. And know that this story is not about sudden terror, but about the soft, persistent pull of a place that refuses to be ignored, a tree that quietly watches, whispers, and endures. As the decades passed, the Devil's Tree quietly became a symbol of mystery, a landmark that held both curiosity and a touch of unease. While the earlier stories were subtle, about strange chills, odd shadows, or animals behaving strangely, over time, darker legends began to form. These were not sudden, loud tales of terror, but gentle, lingering whispers, like a soft wind that moves through the branches at dusk, hinting at something older and deeper than the ordinary forest. Locals began to speak cautiously about curses tied to the tree. They didn't shout their warnings, they whispered them, often leaning close over kitchen tables or across fences, speaking in low, almost reverent tones. The first stories suggested that anyone who harmed the tree, or even disrespected it, would face misfortune. Crops might fail, livestock could fall ill, or the weather could turn against a family unexpectedly. These were small misfortunes, subtle reminders that the tree seemed to hold a quiet power. One tale, passed through generations, tells of a farmer who tried to cut a branch from the tree during a particularly harsh winter. He had been having difficulty with a few stubborn limbs obstructing his path to the barn. It seemed like a simple task, nothing more than pruning to make life easier. But as he raised his saw, the wind shifted. Snow began falling more heavily, the temperature dropped. And the path he had cleared froze overnight. By morning, his tools had been misplaced, and his horse had developed a sudden, mysterious lameness. The farmer did not return to the tree, and the story became a quiet warning: respect the tree, or face gentle but persistent consequences. Another legend tells of a wanderer who, curious about the strange markings on the tree, decided to carve his own initials into the bark. Nothing dramatic occurred at first, he walked away thinking little of it. But over the following weeks, he noticed small but peculiar misfortunes. His car would not start, he misplaced important items, and he felt a strange, lingering fatigue. Nothing overtly terrifying happened. Yet he could not shake the feeling that his actions had disturbed something that preferred silence. The locals who later heard this story nodded knowingly, not because they feared immediate danger, but because they understood the subtle, enduring nature of the tree's influence. Interestingly, these tales are not like typical horror stories. They do not rely on loud shocks, sudden screams, or frightening apparitions. Instead, they dwell in the quiet and slow, misfortunes that seem natural but are tinged with a hint of the extraordinary. They are the kind of stories that linger in the mind at night, encouraging reflection rather than panic. This is what makes the Devil's Tree legend unique: it teaches caution without fear, respect without alarm, and curiosity without danger. Some of the darker legends speak of sightings at night, though again, nothing loud or frantic. Children walking home from friends' houses reported fleeting shapes in the clearing. Adults traveling after dusk felt sudden chills or a sensation that the shadows themselves were watching. There are accounts of faint whispers in the wind, so soft that one might think it was only imagination, yet persistent enough to make a person pause, tilt their head, and glance at the twisted branches. These whispered experiences became part of the folklore, repeated softly around fireplaces and over quiet conversations in small kitchens, becoming an integral part of the tree's reputation. In the 1950s and 1960s, a small group of teenagers decided to test the boundaries of the legend. They visited the tree at night, carrying flashlights and quietly daring each other to approach the clearing. According to their accounts, the night was still, almost unnaturally so. They felt the air thicken around them as they approached, a sensation that made their skin tingle. One of them reported seeing faint figures, shadows that seemed to move in the corner of his vision, disappearing when he looked directly at them. None of them felt overtly threatened, but the experience was enough to leave a quiet unease that lasted for days. They returned home with stories whispered among friends. And the legend continued to grow, not through terror, but through subtle, shared experiences that suggested the tree held mysteries beyond ordinary understanding. The idea of curses became intertwined with the tree's presence. People said that the devil's tree seemed to remember, almost as if it could sense intention. Those who approached it with curiosity and respect might notice nothing unusual at all. Those who approached with mockery, irreverence, or harm in mind often reported small, strange misfortunes. The stories are gentle warnings, like a soft nudge of the wind, reminding humans to be mindful of the natural world and the legends that grow around it. Another recurring legend involves the animals of the forest. Locals frequently reported that dogs, cats, and even birds acted strangely near the tree. Dogs might growl softly, shying away from the clearing. Cats would hiss at the shadows or refuse to step onto the path. Birds that nested nearby might avoid the branches entirely, leaving the tree oddly silent in comparison to the forest around it. These observations, subtle as they are, reinforce the sense that the devil's tree is not merely a part of the landscape, but a presence within it, quietly influencing its surroundings without effort or malice. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of the darker legends is their balance with calm and serenity. Unlike many haunted or cursed locations, the devil's tree does not scream for attention. Its stories are not loud or shocking. They are soft, persistent, and enduring, unfolding slowly over generations. The tree itself remains indifferent to human concerns, standing quietly in the clearing, a sentinel observing the passage of time. Its dark, twisted branches reach toward the sky like silent questions, and its roots dig deep into the soil, anchoring it firmly in the history of the land. Even today, visitors report subtle experiences that echo these older tales. Some feel a slight drop in temperature when approaching the tree. Others describe a sense of being watched, though nothing is visible. Birds might scatter from nearby branches. Or the wind might shift unexpectedly, carrying soft, indistinct sounds through the clearing. These are not moments of terror, but gentle reminders that the world is full of quiet, persistent mysteries, places where time and nature intersect in ways that inspire awe, curiosity, and a careful respect. The legends of curses and shadows serve a quiet purpose. They teach mindfulness, attention, and respect for the forest. They encourage visitors to approach with care, to observe slowly, and to notice small details that might otherwise go unseen. They remind us that not all mysteries are loud or frightening. Some exist in the slow unfolding of the natural world, in the faint movements of shadows, in the gentle chill of a breeze, or in the subtle behavior of animals. These experiences, repeated over decades, create the enduring legend of the devil's tree, and so, the devil's tree stands today much as it did a century ago, a quiet witness to time, a keeper of whispered stories, and a gentle reminder that the natural world is layered with subtle mysteries. The darker legends are not meant to frighten, but to encourage reflection and curiosity. They invite us to walk slowly, observe carefully, and notice the world's quiet wonders. They remind us that some mysteries are meant not to be solved, but to be felt and respected, as we continue our journey through this story, we will explore even stranger tales, sightings of figures, unexplained marks, and reports that blur the line between history and legend. Each story, like a leaf in the forest, adds to the quiet, gentle tapestry of the Devil's Tree. And as you listen, let your mind wander slowly along the forest paths, pausing beneath the twisted branches, feeling the weight of time, the presence of legend, and the gentle pull of mystery that continues to grow around this remarkable tree. As the 20th century drew to a close, the Devil's Tree quietly attracted a new kind of attention. While local whispers, subtle chills, and cautious tales had sustained its legend for decades, modern explorers, journalists, and hobbyists began documenting the tree in ways that previous generations could not. Cameras, tape recorders, and eventually video equipment allowed visitors to capture more than just stories. They could now preserve glimpses of the tree, the forest, and the curious phenomena that seemed to gather around its dark, gnarled trunk. The earliest photographs from the 1960s and 1970s show the tree standing alone in the clearing, its twisted branches reaching skyward like the fingers of a giant hand. The images are quiet, almost serene, capturing the tree as it has always been, ancient, patient, and mysterious. Some photographs are taken during the day, with sunlight filtering through the leaves, highlighting the rough textures of the bark and the shadowed curves of its branches. Others are taken at twilight or on overcast days, when the forest is hushed and the tree appears darker, almost brooding, a silent presence against the soft gray of the sky. Alongside photographs, amateur recordings began to appear. In the late 1970s, a group of teenagers ventured into the clearing with a portable tape recorder. They described the experience as calm yet unusual. The forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so, and their equipment captured subtle sounds, the faint rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind through branches, and, they claimed, low, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the tree itself. Whether these sounds were the wind, distant wildlife, or simply their imagination, they added a layer of quiet fascination to the tree's growing legend. In the 1980s, journalists visiting the area documented their trips with both photography and tape recordings. One reporter described walking to the tree at dusk, when shadows stretched long across the forest floor. He noted a soft, almost imperceptible drop in temperature as he approached, and his camera captured faint streaks of light and shadow that seemed to twist around the branches. He did not claim to see ghosts or spirits, but he did describe the experience as surreal, standing beneath a tree that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary, observing subtle phenomena that defied easy explanation. Modern explorers often speak of the tree in the same calm, observant tone. Hikers and photographers describe approaching the clearing with a sense of quiet anticipation. The forest itself seems to acknowledge their presence, holding its breath as they step among the ferns and fallen leaves. Some report feeling a slight heaviness in the air, a gentle sensation that encourages reflection. Cameras and recorders capture images of twisted branches and play of light, documenting the tree's enduring presence without ever fully revealing its mysteries. One particularly intriguing account comes from a small group of researchers in the early 1990s. They visited the clearing during a quiet summer evening, equipped with both a camera and a sound recorder. As they documented the tree, they noticed something subtle. The shadows beneath the branches seemed to move in ways that did not correspond to the wind or the angle of sunlight. The effect was faint, almost imperceptible, yet persistent enough to catch their attention. When they played back their recordings later, they found faint sounds, soft and almost like whispers, layered beneath the natural noises of the forest. Again, whether these were natural phenomena, equipment anomalies. Or the human imagination is unknown, but the experience added to the gentle, enduring mystery of the tree. Interestingly, the Devil's Tree has inspired more than just photographs and recordings. Its legend has drawn hikers, historians, and curious visitors who approach it with respect and caution. Some bring notebooks, quietly documenting their observations. Others take time to simply sit in the clearing, breathing in the calm forest air and noticing the small details, the way sunlight filters through the leaves, the pattern of bark, the soft rustle of animals in the undergrowth. These modern explorers often speak of the experience as meditative, almost like a gentle journey back in time, connecting them to generations of people who have stood in the same clearing, observing the same tree. Despite the modern equipment and attention, the Devil's Tree remains largely inscrutable. Cameras capture its form but not its presence. Recorders capture sounds, but never a clear explanation. Visitors feel the weight of its history, the subtle strangeness of the clearing, and the quiet pull of legend, but the tree itself continues to stand, unchanged, indifferent to observation. This is part of its charm, part of the enduring fascination. It is both fully present and partially unknowable, a silent observer in the heart of the forest. The subtle phenomena reported by modern explorers are consistent with those described by locals and eyewitnesses for decades. Animals continue to avoid the clearing, shadows continue to appear in unusual ways, and the soft whisper of wind through the branches carries a sense of quiet, ancient presence. Visitors describe moments of calm reflection, tinged with wonder, a feeling that they are in a place that is ordinary and extraordinary at the same time, a place where time seems to move differently, slowed by the presence of something enduring and mysterious. Some explorers attempt experiments. They leave small objects near the tree, hoping to observe movement or changes. They take temperature readings, measure soil moisture, and photograph the clearing at different times of day. Often, the results are subtle, slight shifts in shadows, a small chill in the air, or objects appearing slightly moved. Nothing dramatic, nothing startling, just enough to sustain the quiet fascination that surrounds the tree. These gentle mysteries, repeated over time, are what have made the Devil's Tree legend endure into the modern era. The beauty of these modern explorations is that they show how legend and observation can coexist. Visitors approach with equipment, with a desire to document, and yet find themselves drawn into a slower, quieter experience. They observe, reflect, and notice details that might otherwise be overlooked. They become part of a lineage of witnesses, joining generations of people who have paused in the clearing, feeling the subtle influence of the tree, and leaving quietly with memories, photographs, and stories. It is important to remember that the Devil's Tree does not demand attention. It does not force fear, nor does it insist on being understood. It simply exists, enduring and patient. The modern explorations remind us that sometimes, the most fascinating mysteries are those that reveal themselves slowly, that reward careful observation, and that invite reflection. Standing in the clearing, visitors often describe a feeling of calm. The tree's presence is powerful, yet gentle, grounding them in the forest and in time. By documenting the tree through photographs, recordings, and careful observation, modern explorers have contributed to the legend without disturbing its quiet power. They show us that curiosity and respect can coexist, that it is possible to approach mystery without alarm, and that even in the modern world, there are places where time, nature, and legend meet in a subtle, enduring way. So, as we imagine standing beneath the Devil's Tree today, picture the clearing as it is now, sunlight streaming through the branches, birds chirping softly in the distance, and the faint rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Imagine the twisted trunk, its dark bark rough to the touch, and the subtle shadows that move quietly across the forest floor. Imagine generations of visitors before you, capturing photographs, recording sounds, and quietly marveling at the tree's presence. And feel the calm, gentle pull of the legend, a quiet invitation to observe, reflect, and wonder. The Devil's Tree is not only a part of history, it is a part of ongoing experience. Its story continues to grow slowly, with each new visitor, each new photograph, and each soft whisper in the wind. And as we continue, we will explore the more unusual events and mysterious reports that add further layers to this legend, moments that have inspired awe, curiosity, and a quiet, persistent fascination for anyone who approaches the tree with care and attention. Nightfall brings a different kind of quiet to the forests of New Jersey. The air cools gently, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The sun slips behind distant hills, and the fading light softens the forest, making shadows stretch long and slender across the underbrush. In this calm, half-lit world, the Devil's Tree takes on a presence that is more pronounced, more tangible, yet still serene. Its twisted branches, dark against the twilight sky, appear to reach outward, inviting gentle curiosity rather than fear. Late at night, those who have ventured near the tree often describe a sensation unlike any other. It is not the sudden shock of fright, nor the sharp pang of terror. It is a subtle, persistent awareness, like the forest itself is watching, breathing quietly around you. A light breeze moves through the clearing, brushing softly against the skin, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves and the muted sounds of nocturnal animals. Crickets hum their gentle songs, and owls call to each other from high above. In this peaceful darkness, the tree's presence is quiet, yet undeniable, as if it is aware of each footstep, each breath, each soft murmur of the forest around it. One of the earliest recorded late-night visits comes from the 1950s, when a group of local boys decided to test the old legends. They approached the clearing under a soft moonlight, their flashlights casting pools of warm light across the forest floor. The tree loomed before them, dark and twisted, its limbs forming intricate patterns against the night sky. One of the boys, Tommy, later recalled the sensation of stillness that greeted them. The air seemed heavier here, thicker, carrying a quiet weight that pressed gently against their senses. Their flashlights flicked across the bark, revealing rough textures, small knots, and scars from previous generations, yet there was something more, an intangible feeling that the tree was observing them, silently and without judgment. Another account comes from a couple who visited the tree on a late autumn evening in the 1970s. They were hiking quietly, enjoying the crisp night air and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. As they entered the clearing, they felt a sudden drop in temperature. It was not an alarming cold, but a subtle shift, enough to make them pull their jackets closer and pause in their steps. Shadows stretched long beneath the twisted branches, moving slightly even though the wind was barely a whisper. For a few minutes, they stood in quiet awe, noticing how the tree seemed to dominate the space, holding the clearing in calm suspension. They later described the experience as strangely soothing, an encounter that left them both reflective and peaceful, as though the tree had shared a moment of quiet presence with them. Some visitors report hearing soft, indistinct sounds at night. Low rustlings, faint whispers, or the gentle creaking of branches might catch the ear, but rarely is anything identifiable. One early 1980s account tells of a man named Harold, walking alone after sunset. He noted the usual calm of the forest, but as he neared the clearing, he felt a light pressure in the air, like the subtle weight of attention. A faint rustle seemed to come from just beyond the branches, though nothing was visible. Harold paused, listening carefully. The sounds were quiet, almost soothing, blending seamlessly with the natural nocturnal noises of the forest. He left with no fear, only a lingering curiosity about what he had perceived. And a deepened respect for the presence of the tree. In the 1990s, a small group of amateur photographers documented a late-night visit with soft LED lights and quiet cameras. They observed the branches, the shadows, and the subtle movements of the forest floor. One photographer, Jessica, noted that the longer they stayed, the more aware she became of the space around the tree. It was not threatening, but there was a profound sense of stillness, a kind of quiet expectation. Even animals seemed to respect the clearing. A small fox paused at the edge, watching them for a moment before moving silently into the darkness. This gentle interplay between the observers, the tree, and the surrounding forest deepened the sense that the devil's tree was more than an ordinary oak, it was a silent, ancient participant in the life of the woods. The late-night accounts often describe subtle sensations rather than overt phenomena. A chill in the air, the quiet movement of shadows, the sense of being observed. These experiences, gentle and unhurried, encourage careful attention. Visitors who approach the tree at night report a feeling of slowed time, as though the clearing exists in a space slightly apart from the world beyond the forest. There is no urgency, no alarm, only a quiet invitation to notice, to reflect, and to participate in the long tradition of observation that surrounds this singular tree. Many of the late-night visitors also notice the patterns of the bark, the twists of the branches, and the subtle irregularities that make the tree seem almost alive. These features are not frightening, but intriguing, evoking a sense of ancient wisdom. Observers speak softly to one another, sharing notes in whispers, careful not to disturb the stillness. Even in modern times, with the convenience of cameras and flashlights, the experience remains intimate, personal, and calming, drawing attention to the tree's quiet majesty rather than any loud, dramatic fear. One of the more remarkable aspects of these nighttime encounters is the consistency of the reports. Across decades, different people have described the same phenomena: subtle temperature changes, shadows that move in unexpected ways. A sense of presence that is gentle but persistent. It is not a place of sudden fright, but a clearing that encourages reflection, awareness, and careful observation. Visitors leave with a sense of connection, to the forest, to the tree, and to the generations of people who have stood quietly beneath its branches before them. Even animals are said to respond differently at night. Owls hoot softly, their calls echoing through the clearing. Deer may pass at a distance, pausing briefly before moving on. Small nocturnal creatures scuttle through the underbrush, their movements blending into the gentle rhythm of the forest. All of this contributes to the sense that the clearing is alive in its own way, yet calm, measured, and enduring. The Devil's Tree stands at the center of this quiet ecosystem, an anchor point in the soft, unfolding rhythm of night. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these nighttime visits is the balance of mystery and serenity. The tree invites curiosity without alarm. Shadows move in subtle ways, temperatures shift gently, and soft sounds arise naturally from the forest. There is no rush, no need to interpret or explain. The experience encourages mindfulness, a slow awareness of the natural world, and a gentle connection to both legend and history. Those who visit at night often speak of calm introspection, of feeling part of something larger than themselves, a shared quiet with the forest and the tree that has stood for centuries. As the night deepens, the forest grows quieter still. Leaves settle into soft rustles, the wind slows, and the darkness wraps around the clearing like a gentle blanket. The devil's tree stands silently in the center, its twisted branches silhouetted against the moonlit sky, calm, patient, and watchful. The subtle sensations, the chill, the whispers, the shifting shadows, linger in memory, leaving a soft, persistent impression that blends awe with tranquility. This is the essence of the late-night legend, not terror, but a quiet, gentle fascination that encourages observation, reflection, and respect. So, as you imagine yourself standing beneath the devil's tree tonight, picture the clearing softly illuminated by the moon. Hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal birds, and the subtle whisper of the wind. Feel the gentle presence of the tree, patient and calm, reaching its twisted branches skyward, observing quietly without judgment. And allow yourself to drift slowly, carried by the serenity of the forest, the weight of history, and the enduring, mysterious charm of this remarkable oak. The devil's tree stands not only as a witness to time, but as a bridge between centuries of human imagination and the quiet persistence of nature. To understand why it became such a focal point of legend, we must drift slowly into the past, considering the stories and beliefs of the people who first inhabited the forests around it. From the whispered tales of Native Americans to the cautious superstitions of early settlers, each layer adds depth to the gentle, enduring mystery of the tree. Long before European settlers arrived in South Jersey, the forests were home to indigenous peoples, including the Lenape. Their relationship with the land was deep, intimate, and spiritual. Every river, hill, and tree held meaning. Large, ancient trees were often regarded as sacred. They were places where stories of creation, life, and the cycles of nature were quietly remembered. It is possible, though not definitively documented, that the tree we now call the Devil's Tree was known to the Lenape as a place of importance, an oak whose twisting limbs reached both skyward and into the soil, embodying a quiet, patient wisdom. Native American oral traditions often honor trees as witnesses and guardians. Some trees marked boundaries, others were used as sites for storytelling, meditation, or reflection. Trees could be symbols of endurance and resilience, standing through storms, harsh winters, and long summers. The Devil's Tree, with its twisted branches and solitary position in the clearing, fits beautifully into this pattern, a natural sentinel whose presence would have been impossible to ignore. Visitors who approach the clearing today might feel the faint echo of these ancient intentions, a place that inspires respect, reflection, and mindfulness. When European settlers arrived, they carried their own beliefs, superstitions, and cautionary stories. Forests were places of both sustenance and danger, and large, solitary trees often inspired awe or fear. The settlers noted the unusual shape of the Devil's Tree and the way it stood alone in the clearing. In a world without streetlights or clear paths, a tree like this could seem to hold power, an unseen presence in the quiet of the woods. Some believed it to be cursed, others said it was a gathering point for spirits. These ideas were whispered carefully, as if speaking too loudly could draw the attention of something unseen. One common theory about the tree's origin of mystery is tied to its position in the forest. Standing alone, dark and twisted, it creates its own microcosm of shadow and light. In the flickering glow of twilight, branches that are ordinary in the daylight can appear like grasping hands, shadows seem to stretch and move, and the forest around it becomes hushed. Early settlers may have interpreted these natural effects as signs of supernatural presence. Without modern explanations, these phenomena were quietly incorporated into local superstition, growing with each retelling and careful observation. Stories suggest that the Devil's Tree may have been used as a boundary marker for early settlers. Large trees were often chosen to signify property lines, meeting points, or notable locations in a landscape. The solitary, imposing nature of this oak would have made it ideal for such a purpose. Yet, when a tree is used as a marker, it also becomes a symbol. Over time, the simple practical use could slowly transform into legend. If a tree marked an important place in the forest, and strange occurrences were observed there, like a chill in the air or unusual behavior from animals, then the practical could quietly evolve into the mysterious. Some early settlers told stories of seeing strange symbols carved into the tree, though it is unclear whether these were the work of human hands or natural formations in the bark. Whatever the origin, these marks added to the sense of curiosity and caution. People approached the tree slowly, observing the carvings without touching, noting their intricate shapes and wondering whether they were signs, warnings, or simply expressions of artistic attention from a long-forgotten hand. Over decades, such observations contributed to the aura of quiet mystery, reinforcing the idea that the tree was more than just a part of the forest. It was a witness to history, a silent storyteller, and perhaps a guardian of hidden knowledge. The blending of Native American reverence and European superstition created fertile ground for legends that would endure for generations. Each group contributed its own layer of meaning. To the indigenous peoples, the tree may have been a symbol of endurance and quiet wisdom. To the settlers, it became a place where caution was warranted, where the forest whispered softly of unseen presences and gentle, subtle curses. Both interpretations highlight the same core idea, that this tree commands attention, respect, and reflection, and that its story grows with those who observe it carefully. One of the most fascinating aspects of this historical blending is how slowly the legend grew. Unlike a tale of sudden fright, the Devil's Tree evolved quietly over decades, shaped by observations, subtle events, and careful storytelling. People didn't rush to the clearing seeking terror, they came to notice, to reflect, and to participate in the story by being mindful observers. Their experiences were gentle, layered, and often introspective. The forest itself seemed to invite this approach, with its soft rustling leaves, winding paths, and the slow, patient movement of wildlife that surrounded the clearing. Interestingly, some accounts suggest that early settlers were aware of the power of suggestion. They knew that quiet observations, repeated over time, could grow into more pronounced legends. A chill in the air could be remembered as a mysterious presence, a shadow falling oddly could become a sign of the supernatural. The Devil's Tree is a perfect example of how legend can evolve naturally, without sensationalism or alarm, simply through careful attention, reflection, and storytelling. In many ways, this chapter of the tree's history shows the harmony between nature and human imagination. Observers over centuries, indigenous peoples, settlers, and modern visitors, have all noted its presence. They recognize that this was not an ordinary tree. Its twisted branches, dark bark, and solitary position create a natural focal point in the forest. The legends that grew around it are gentle echoes of human attention. A testament to how stories can form naturally when people interact with the environment in thoughtful, deliberate ways. Even today, visitors who approach the tree are often struck by the same feelings reported centuries ago. The clearing feels still, almost as though it exists in a slightly different rhythm than the surrounding forest. The air carries a subtle weight, The shadows of branches stretch and twist in quiet patterns, and the mind naturally becomes reflective. In this way, the Devil's Tree continues to connect generations of observers, providing a slow, gentle meditation on nature, history, and the quiet persistence of legend, as you imagine yourself walking through the forest near the Devil's Tree. Picture the gentle interplay of history and observation. See the long shadows cast by the setting sun, smell the damp earth, and feel the subtle breeze stirring through the leaves. Imagine the Native Americans who may have paused here centuries ago, the early settlers who whispered stories of caution and respect, and the countless travelers who followed quietly in their footsteps. The tree itself stands unchanged, a patient observer of all, offering neither alarm nor sudden surprise, only presence, reflection, and quiet mystery. This connection between past and present is part of what makes the Devil's Tree so compelling. It is not simply a tree or a curiosity, it is a symbol of continuity. Of human observation meeting the natural world, and of stories growing slowly, patiently, across generations. It reminds us that legends are often rooted not in dramatic events, but in careful noticing, quiet reflection, and the subtle influence of extraordinary features in ordinary landscapes. So, as we rest in thought beneath the imagined branches of the Devil's Tree, let us remember that its story is layered, gentle, and enduring. From indigenous reverence to settler caution, from whispered superstitions to quiet modern observations, every generation has added its own layer, enriching the legend without disturbing its serene presence. And as we move forward into the next chapter, we will explore some of the more unusual and mysterious events of the 20th century, the sightings, the subtle phenomena, and the quiet moments that have continued to captivate those who approach this remarkable tree. The Devil's Tree, standing alone in its clearing, has long fascinated those who notice the details of its bark. Over the years, countless observers have pointed out small, unusual markings etched into its trunk.